Welcome to Sullivan Smart Sense. I'm Heather Sullivan. Today we are going to talk about a nuisance, something we all hate, robocalls. There's been a lot of things done lately to try and curb them, and yet we're still seeing climbing numbers of losses, huge financial losses of people losing money to scams from robocalls. The calls keep coming. The robotexts have been getting worse. So today I have an expert from Robokiller who's going to talk to us about what's being done, what's working, what's not, and what we can do to try and protect ourselves. So join me in welcoming Julia Porter with Robokiller. Thanks so much for being with us, Julia.
Thanks for having me.
For anyone who might not know, let's just talk a little bit about Robokiller, because you guys are technology that helps people block these calls. But I like also that you really do deep dives into the research and what's happening in this space.
Well, appreciate the support. Yes, Robokiller has been around since 2017. And yes, we've been tracking robocall and spam text trends since around that time exactly. And so, of course, evolving our technology as we're seeing things unfold. Robokiller is probably the most technologically advanced system for blocking calls and text. We do use AI and machine learning to identify and block text for our users, block calls and text for our users. And we are about 99% effective in both in doing that.
Well, you caught me with a buzzword there because everybody's talking about AI. Can you just talk a little bit about how you guys are using AI?
Yes, of course. So, we have a very large database of billions and billions of known calls and text scams. We are using AI to assess just the commonalities of those scams, and of course apply that to our real-time decision making as to whether or not to block a call one of our or text a user is receiving real time. Our goal really in doing both of that is to prevent these calls and texts from reaching our user base at all, which can be very difficult to do without an app like Robokiller. And certainly happy to get into all the reasons why that is, because there's a lot going on there for sure.
Well, let's dive into the numbers first, because the numbers are scary. Because we've seen actions, and we'll get into the actions that have taken place by the government to try and curb this. And yet, I think we're seeing 78 billion robocalls just the first half of 2023. 31 billion robotexts, those are climbing, and the financial losses that are hitting people from the scams of these calls, they're projected to hit $90 billion just this year. So those are some really scary numbers. First, let's just talk about what you guys are seeing and why you think we are continuing to see some of this growth.
Definitely. The first thing to remember is that scammers are smart. They watch the news, they keep up with technological trends. And we have seen a very critical shift really in response to what we are seeing as successful efforts by the FCC and government to thwart robocalls. But we have seen kind of prior to that really being rolled out, scammers acknowledging that in the way that they are targeting their robocall scams, and of course also shifting to text-based scams. To address robocalls first, what we're really seeing is a shift in approach to quantity of spam calls to quality, where scammers are being more targeted in the scams that they're designing to be very believable, and really get you to believe and fall for a phone scam. And as a result, unfortunately, what we have seen as reported by the FTC is that really in the last year, we've gone from average financial losses to a robocall scam from around $800 to $1,000 to about $1,500 for a robocall scam. So we are seeing the numbers really indicate that unfortunately for consumers, this shift in tactic is working. And consumers, unfortunately, really though spam calls are down, are still very exposed and at risk. And then, of course, we add, one extra layer now, unfortunately, of this just explosion of spam text in response to shifting away from robocalls as kind of the spray and pray approach that scammers take. And really, that's what we're seeing exactly, just lots and lots of spam texts where scammers aren't necessarily being that targeted, just trying to send, billions and billions of texts each month and hope that, someone falls for it. And so, yeah, that's, I think, really the state, unfortunately, of the phone scam landscape in the U.S.
It's alarming, and I know what you're talking about them getting more specific, more personalized as they're targeting people. When I first started covering this issue years ago, it was a lot of car warranties and healthcare plans. What are some of the topics or scams that you're seeing now that are really kind of pulling people in?
we're really seeing scammers pay attention to current trends. So for example, when a lot of US headlines were talking about student loan scams, we're seeing scammers really respond with an uptick almost immediately in student loan phone scams. So what we're seeing is very much a focus on relevancy that scammers are taking, where that seems to be maybe why people are losing more money, right? Because they are just whatever is kind of going on that scammers are taking advantage of, that's top of mind for the recipient of the phone call. And so really that is, I think, one of the key dynamics that unfortunately is driving an increase in financial losses.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the efforts that have been put in place. First, we just saw just this week this headline about the FCC fining $300 million fine against an international network that was being run out of Panama. They're hailing this. Can you talk a little bit about this? Will we see an impact in this cutting down some of the, like, how big was this? What are your thoughts on that fine that'll happen? Or are they making so much money that they're like, we'll pay it, doesn't matter?
So the car warranty scam is a huge win for the FCC. We are very excited to see that this as a result of the stir-shaken technological framework that was rolled out about 2 years ago now. And really what that was designed to do was to create a caller ID verification framework that would allow the government to more effectively trace back scam operations like the car warranty scam. Since they have been able to effectively shut down these scams and, of course, deliver consequences, as we've seen this week, we are seeing those numbers being reflected in national robocall estimates. Despite robocalls being up a bit at mid-year this year, we still are pacing to be about 20% lower in total US spam call volume by the end of this year, largely as a result of this car warranty shutdown. Just to give you a rough sense, the car warranty robocall, of the 4 or 5 billion estimated robocalls per month that Robokiller monitors, the car warranty robocall, at depending on timing, was anywhere between 1 or 2 billion robocalls of that total. So, and since that shutdown, that has effectively been reduced to zero. And so, of course, that's driving one of the decreases that we're seeing.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about Stir Shaken. And this was basically the FCC was telling the phone carriers that they needed to, sort of be using this technology to crack down and prevent some of these. Talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing. How is that working? Is it helping? Is it cutting down some of these?
Exactly. Yeah. So what it seems to be doing in terms of just its success so far is creating a framework that is easy for the government to identify scams and then, yes, dictate to certain networks where these scams might be originating from, that they need to take action to stop them. So really, what it seems to be doing is allowing the government to enforce action for specific operations that, of course, are threatening consumers real time. What they're also able to do is identify what's coming from, overseas and, try to apply pressure to international carriers by, cutting them off their access off to the US networks if they don't comply with standards. So really what we're seeing is a really great framework for enforcement that is driving real results, as we've seen with the car warranty scam.
And so that's great to hear, but it sounds like the biggest problem is they've just gotten, when they do get through and we take the call, they've gotten better, they've gotten smarter, and they're getting more money out of people.
That's correct, unfortunately.
So what are some things that you think people can do, to try and prevent them, try and protect themselves?
I think first and foremost, it's important to just have a level of skepticism on these calls. I mean, of course, that's not a great answer for all of us. We use our phones daily. We are getting critical information for our phones. We want to believe that when our phone is ringing, it's someone who needs to talk to us and they're a trustworthy person. But unfortunately, that's just not the state of the phone call in the U.S. right now. And so first and foremost, just having a healthy level of skepticism on that phone call and what they might be calling about is very important. What we tell consumers to look out for, if you do answer a call and think it is important and then kind of get on there and it starts to get a little suspicious, usually any sort of action that a caller is trying to get you to take urgently is a good sign that maybe something is off there, right? Oftentimes your bank won't call you necessarily out of the blue. They'll text you or send you an email if there's some sort of problem, or just have multiple forms of communication versus a single phone call. Just things like that that I think are important to look out for. But of course, we all live very busy lives, and that's hard to keep top of mind all the time. So not answering phone calls that you don't recognize is another great way to just prevent this from happening. Again, also not really that realistic all the time. Unfortunately, really the only way to prevent these calls and texts from reaching you in the first place is to have a call blocker like Robokiller and Text Killer. The reason for that is, these types of apps have billions and billions of known phone scams in their database that they can just prevent from reaching you at all. The FCC's, framework doesn't necessarily do that, and a lot of carriers don't necessarily offer that. With phone plans. So unfortunately, that really is kind of the main way to just say, don't want to get these at all, and do want to have, some ongoing protection that I don't have to, constantly think about every time my phone rings.
And let me ask you, I had put in my notes here, and I've neglected to ask when we were talking about this earlier, but 48 states have sued Avid Telecom about allowing these calls, after the stir shaken requirement took effect. Can you talk just a little bit about what that might do? That's 48 states. That's a good number of states getting involved in that.
We are loving more people joining the fight. Of course, Robokiller has been on the front lines since 2017, and it's, again, I think this is a testament to the framework and capabilities that the FCC now has in terms of tracing these scams back and being able to hold certain people accountable. It's great to see more states, and of course the consumers that live in them really kind of join in on bringing these people to justice that really have kind of abused this technology for a while now.
And lastly, the putting your phone numbers on the do not call registries, is that something that we need to kind of periodically do? Does it, once and done? What are your thoughts on that?
It should be once and done from our interpretation of how that's set up. Really, the main misconception with the do not call list is that the do not call list will stop you from receiving any legitimate telemarketing calls. Unfortunately, a lot of scammers already know they're breaking the law and aren't going to abide by the do not call list. And so really that what we've seen is that can only have, so great of an impact. It certainly helps, and we do recommend it. But unfortunately, scammers, are not following the rules at all, and the do not call list is certainly one that they're avoiding as well.
What's your you seem optimistic, and I like that. What's your outlook on the big picture of this? Will we ever see this problem be curbed completely?
We're at a very interesting inflection point for robocalls, right? We're seeing a lot of great progress from the government. We're very excited about that. The FCC is actually currently investigating a similar framework for spam text. So we've seen, encouraging rates of response to address that problem from the FCC. And no solution there yet, but definitely making progress. That's exciting. So we do think that will continue to move in the right direction, and we will see big impacts. And again, that for now seems to be isolated to specific scams that can be identified and traced back. So that I think is super exciting. In terms of the technology, again, everyone is talking about AI. We are certainly keeping an eye on how that is going to impact the landscape, both for robocalls and text, whether there is that technology creates any sort of loopholes in some of the frameworks that are designed. We're certainly, updating our technology to make sure that we're ahead of that curve, both for robocalls and text. I think one headline that's made its way through the states recently is this concept of deep fakes that could be a legitimate risk to consumers on the robocall side, where a robocaller is actually calling, getting you to say yes or no so that they can actually access your voice, use AI to speak in any words in your voice that they want to access things like banking information and verification. We haven't seen that at scale, but it's certainly a risk to consumers that we're watching very closely. So right now things are looking a little bit better on the robocall side. There's some signs that spam text will be following soon, but again, this all could change, depending on how the future of AI gets implemented by these scammers.
Yeah, it's a little scary, but a lot to keep an eye on. Well,
Definitely.
Julia Porter, thank you so much from Robokiller. We really appreciate all of your insights. So helpful to really hear from folks on the front lines about ways that we can protect ourselves, and also just what's really happening out there. And I am encouraged to hear that you feel like we're going to see some progress in cutting some of these down. So it was great to talk with you. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you so much for being with us as well. Hopefully we gave you some good information to help protect yourself from robocalls, robotexts that are scams. Again, they're expecting people to lose $90 billion just this year. So really be careful about answering, not answering if you can avoid it. Put your number on that do not call registry if you haven't already, but be really careful about anyone who's trying to get money out of you quickly for any circumstance. Just be sure that you're checking things out before you respond to anything. That will certainly help to protect you. Thanks so much for joining us here on Sullivan Smart Sense. We'll see you next time.